ಗಣ ಗಣ ಮನ ನದಿಯ ವತನಿಯ ಗಣ ಗಣ ಮನ ನದಿಯ ವತನಿಯ उमड़ उमड़ नई कामया छलक छलक उठे चमकीली धानी नया है सवेरा भारत मेरा भारत तेरा गंगा.
Super. Great.
My computer has it's been a very exciting last 30 minutes or so.
Talk about Murphy's Law. Always
I know,
happens.
and you
Yeah.
think, oh, it's been a year and a half of pandemic, and I know how to do this, or this I've done 10 times, and then for whatever reason it just decides to.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, every single time I have a Zoom call or some sort of a meeting with Sir, it always happens. I'm struggling to make it work. And then Sir on the other end is like, do this, it might work this way.
Yeah,
And that actually turns out to be working. So,
of course.
in fact, right on the day of his podcast as well, I mean, I was going to record it on Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
Because back it was an year ago was when I recorded the podcast with him, and then I
Okay.
had no clue how to use Zoom, and I was using
Yeah.
Microsoft Teams because I work in the Microsoft space, and then
Got it.
I was more familiar with the platform. And yeah, it was just fun and games, and then it just didn't work, and somehow made it happen. And Sir had never used Microsoft Teams before back then, but
Okay.
he advised saying, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And then that actually turned out to be working.
Right.
Anyway,
Of course. That's so
right,
funny.
and
I feel like
Rohit,
there's so many stories like
yeah,
that.
of course, with 100 and your guest number 111, by the way, for the
Wow.
record. Yeah, it's been a
That's
phenomenal
awesome.
journey.
That's
So
so cool. Congratulations.
thank you so much, and I'm very excited to have you as part of this journey.
Thanks. I'm
But
excited to be here.
before I deep dive into a number of things that I wanted to touch on, just wanted to check: have you got water, coffee, or anything that you might want? Because I'm conscious that this will go for about 45-50 minutes.
Sure,
So
yeah. I have the two things that I need. I have water and chapstick. So
is that winter there? Is it or?
it's it's California winter.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was just about to say.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm generally ashamed to say that I'm cold to most people. But it has been a pretty cold winter here. And in general, I get chapped lips, so I carry actually about 4 or 5 of these around in my backpack at
Right.
all times, because I also lose them or they end up in the laundry machine, or so.
Yeah. And when you say it gets cold, how cold does it actually get during winter? What is winter like in California?
So I'm currently in the Bay Area. So it doesn't get too bad here. Daytime might be low 50s
Okay. Fahrenheit.
in Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And then nights can get into the 30s, which is say close to zero.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
So yeah, but
Right.
yeah, you might get like cars will frost over in the night, but I mean,
Right.
most people are not out, hopefully, at that time of night.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Right. And
I mean,
obviously,
I lived in Boston for about 8 years.
yeah, I can
So
imagine. Must have
I
been the
really
other
have nothing to
extreme.
complain about being here, but I guess we adapt quickly.
Was that a conscious move to get away from the weather, or what
No,
got you
well,
moving to California?
it's funny. I didn't even intend to be in Boston in the first place. I grew up here. I spent my whole life here, and I went to Boston for college.
Yeah.
And then I hated Boston when I was there in college. I could not stand it. I was like, you can't drive, and I grew up in California, such a driving culture.
Right.
There's no great Mexican food, and I grew up
Mm.
spoiled with Mexican food. The weather was like the worst. And then I moved to LA for about 10 months, maybe after I graduated. And then I got offered a job. So I moved back to work at my college at Berklee College of Music. And then I fell in love with the city, and I lived there for 6 years after that, I think, working 5 or 6 years. No, and then I ended up moving back. I was going to move to New York with my partner when the pandemic hit. And then we holed up in Boston for a little while, and she's from India, so she ended up going back on one of those Vande Bharat flights, and we said we're going to move to New York in a couple months, so I'll go home and hang out with my parents in California for 2 months. Whatever this coronavirus thing is will blow over, and then we'll go to New York in September, and then it never went away. So what I thought was going to be a 2-month trip to my parents' place ended up being a year and a half, 2 years in a couple months, I guess.
Yeah.
So I had to redo my room, make sure that it was like I didn't feel like a 14-year-old, and I had like Batman Begins poster and some other things. So I redid my whole room, and
Nah, that wasn't necessary. I mean, podcasts are usually as raw as possible, and so yeah, super cool. Thanks once again for accepting my invite. So I want to confess something before I start off. So I have to be honest here. So all my life I've always been I grew up listening to Sir's music, and I've always been listening to predominantly 95% Sir's music. And with that said, I haven't been exposed much to the other musical talents that are out there, like, for example, like yourselves. So now, as part of this journey, what happened was all the Sir's fans got in touch with me, and what's called this I Love ARR community evolved as part of this podcast journey. So, and within the community, people discuss a lot about other artists, and then from time to time, I started seeing your reels popping up, and I was intrigued, and that's when I've watched a number of your reels that way, and then that's how I got exposed. I'm so glad that it happened, and then once I watched it, I knew for sure that I wanted to bring you on the podcast for sure, and I knew there should have been some influence from Sir's world into your world, and I would definitely wanted to hear about your journey, and how do you make magic happen, and then more about your talent, your upbringing, and whatnot. So many other aspects that I want to touch on. So hence why I just wanted to confess to start off. I'm really sorry. I'm just opening up now, starting to embrace the talent out there. And to be honest, even Amit Trivedi had come on the podcast, as you might be aware, and then I've barely heard only two of his songs, and he was fine with it. We were more to talk about Sir and his music and his influence and things like that. So he was not really offended, but I wanted to be absolutely honest with him.
Of course.
So thanks once again for joining me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You accepted my invite. So thanks, Rohith.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had been, aware of the podcast for a while, and I was telling my mom actually that I'm doing this, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I've definitely seen these videos." And she pulled up her YouTube, and she'd seen, a few of them. I mean, for people who, I think there's a category of people like you, and I don't want to put myself in that category, but I maybe am tier 2 of people who grew up listening to Rahman Sir's music and have this healthy obsession with it, let's say. And even for people who I think are peripherally aware of his music, I think if you spend some time listening to his music and learning about, his whole vibe, I think you will run across his podcast, because so many of his collaborators, so many people who are influenced by him, he himself, have all been on the podcast, and it's a great way to also get to know some of these people. And it really, sometimes you think of people. I had this experience with Clinton, who I think was on the podcast as well. He had come to Berkeley when I was a student, and I grew up only knowing him on the back of the Kandukondain CD as Clinton, one name Clinton, and so that was the only connection I really had. And it was like, this is a real person. It's not just the smile guy,
Yeah.
And it's nice to like see people as people and learn about them. And so it's pretty cool for me also to be included in this group of people. I'll just shove myself in this group and pretend that I'm part of it.
No, for sure. I mean, look, I absolutely love your talent, and what I absolutely appreciate about the fact is the platform that we have got, like Instagram Reels, and you make the absolute best use of that in terms of the productive use of it. Let me put it that way, and people love it. It brings happiness, it brings a smile, and even your most recent one, Tere Rang, I absolutely loved it. And then I could see, then I was scrolling through the comments, and number of those people who have commented on your reel are from my community, the ARR
That's
community.
so cool.
And I was just smiling when I was looking, and none of these guys actually even know till this moment that you're going to be on the podcast. They're going to be blown away, and I wanted to keep it absolutely surprising for them, and then I didn't want to reveal it. And then so I was just smiling when I was reading through the comments, and then so that's the kind of magic that you're creating. And then also in the interesting times that we have been, and sort of we are still in it, it's not over yet, and you're bringing smiles. And then look, this is, you're the kind of people I absolutely want to talk to in this journey. And hopefully this journey and this podcast can be of some help, even if it's 1%, to showcase your talent to a section of people who are not opened up yet. I would be super happy if it does that. So
Thank you.
So Rohith, thanks once again. And then look, there are so many aspects that I want to touch on, to be honest. But before I dive into all those things, I would like you to talk about your upbringing. So because your talent is amazing, I just want to understand what's been your childhood like, and then how much of an influence did your parents have in your passion, or in supporting you in pursuing your passion, put it that way.
So I was born and raised in the US.
Right.
Both my parents are from India. My dad is Chennai through and through. My mom is Tamil, but she grew up in the north, and she kind of grew up all around India. So she's like pan-Indian, you might say. And they moved here, and I was born kind of around the time that Rahman sir started writing for films. So I grew up listening to, actually, weirdly, I would say more Indian music than non-Indian music. And I think that's two things. It's one, my dad's family is very musically inclined. So my grandmother was a dancer, a Bharatanatyam dancer, composer, mridangist, violinist, harikatha artist. She was like a catch-all kind of person. And my father had bands growing up and loved listening to Ilayaraja sir's music, and I know a lot of Tamil film music. And then my mom is a carnatic vocalist. So I just was around music all the time. We had Ilayaraja cassettes that my dad brought with him when they came here. And so that was kind of the environment. And then, slowly, like a Roja CD would appear, or like a Tirda Tirda CD would appear. And the house started to sort of expand in that way. But I also grew up, obviously, I'm still an American kid. So I grew up listening to NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, and, I went through an Avril Lavigne phase and all of those things. So it was kind of a mix of musical influences growing up. But I think the fact that my mom was a performer and a teacher meant that there was always music in the house. So when I woke up in the morning, she was already she had a couple classes she would teach from like 5 to 6 and 6 to 7 or something like that in the morning. Before I get up, I wake up, someone is singing something. I come back from school, then she teaches, and then we'd have dinner. She might go to rehearsal for an Narangetram or a dance performance or something. So there was always music. So I kind of joke that I kind of didn't have a choice. I just had to get involved in music somehow. And I used to sit in her classroom and try to sing songs or take a candy box and try to play mridangam while she was teaching. Um, and they were always really encouraging with me, but in a very, I'm going to say, non-traditional way. And I just mean this because I know a lot of my friends who also grew up in Indian or South Asian households tend to, they do kuman, they do carnatic music or Hindustani music, and they learn one instrument and they do a dance and they do a variety of things that's sort of kind of just a given in their life. And I really lucked out because my parents were just like, hey, do you like this? If you like it, you should do it. I would do soccer. I was like, guys, I'm terrible at this and I don't like it. I'm like, cool, okay, don't do soccer. What do you like? Eventually I phased out sports entirely and I did musical theater instead. I didn't do speech and debate for more than a year. I didn't do, computer science in school. I was kind of the odd one out, and they were always really, they never pressured me to do anything. And I remember going through a phase where I didn't want to sing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my mom is somewhat well known in this community in the Bay Area. She
Right.
sings for most dance programs here, or at least did for the first 20 years when she lived here. Now there's so many people here in the Bay. But so it was always like, oh, you're Asha's son, you must be really good. And so that sort of pressure, even in this small community, combined with me opening up like the kind of music that I listen to, my friends are listening to, like old classic rock, and I'm listening to like D.K. Jayaraman Navavarnams, and that's kind of the vibe. Wow. I'm aware of what's happening at the time, but in terms of old repertoire, it was kind of what my parents grew up listening to, which wasn't necessarily, the Zeppelins or the or older. It was Carnatic music. It was old Tamil film music, old Hindi film music. So
yeah,
I went through this phase where I was like, I'm not gonna sing Carnatic music. I'm gonna sing like Western music, and I was really convinced that this was gonna be my thing. And I was like, I'm gonna be like Michael Bublé or Jamie Cullum or one of these people, and sing like this jazz pop kind of thing. And then I applied to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and when I got there, before I could even start classes during orientation week, some person saw my shruti box in my room and was like, oh, dude, is that like an Indian drone thing? And I was like, yeah. I grew up singing South Indian classical or traditional music. And he was like, oh, could you do like a solo on this song that I have? And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I had never done something like that, like one of these things, which I now realize might be a little played out of like, there's something and you just do a lap over it. And it's like, cool. But I had never done something like that. And I was really excited. And I did that. And then since then, I think I've sung twice in English in the last 12 years or something. Right. There was just no going back after that. And I think I found a different perspective of looking at Indian music that kind of allowed me to feel a little bit more comfortable or less pressure.
Yeah.
And that I'm really grateful for. And then, life has sort of just been like a linear thing since then. Yeah.
Amazing. So cool. So how long have you been learning Carnatic music, if I can put it that way?
So officially, I think I started learning when I was 5.
Right.
Yeah, my mom doesn't usually take students below. She usually 6 is kind of her lower limit. Yeah. But I think me being in the house all the time and around music all the time, whether she was teaching or not, I was starting to pick up certain things.
Yeah.
And so she felt a desire to sort of nurture that. But I'd never got special. I actually got reverse special treatment. So I would get yelled at more.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
It was always the opposite. But no, I was always put in a group class for the first, until I think, all the basics, Sadli Varses, Dhatu Varses, Alankarams, Geetams, even, until we finished a good number of Varnams, I never did individual classes. It was always with other students. And I think that was a conscious decision on her part to not single me out or not do anything like that. Right. And then, after a certain point, it was like, she had a free hour. I was done with homework. I had a free hour. Well, she might as well teach me something, maybe a little head, maybe now is a good time to do a varali or a todi or start teaching improvisation. So that started happening. And then from then on, we've had this very unstructured, organic kind of approach to how I learn from her. It'll be like, hey, can you teach me this composition in the car on the way to a trip somewhere? Or just plug in back when you had an iPod, where you would have to download a Takatambura track,
Yeah,
and then the cable would be connected to like a cassette, and then you plug the cassette into the car, so that's how you could play your iPod in the car, and you would
I
do things
remember.
like that. Yeah. I feel like these things date you now, but it's
Yeah,
fine. But yeah, yeah,
amazing, great. And
I've
look, I'm a sucker for Carnatic music. Not that I can sing, nor do I have the knowledge that I can talk about. But my grandma used to be a Carnatic music teacher in the past, and I
oh wow.
regret that I did not learn from her as much as she tried to push me, and I didn't. Yeah, somehow it just didn't happen, and I regret not
Mhm.
doing that. So I've only had what's called this Kelvinyanam, if I can put it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sort of, I can probably only guess ragams, and I think 9 out of 10 times, every single time, I remember in my childhood, if something plays on the TV and she would ask me, Chandar, enna ragam idu? And then I would be like, Party copy, because that was the only ragam that it just made it cool for me to say copy. And she would tell me, you mean the ragam copy, or you want copy now? I said both.
That's so
So,
funny.
do you have any favorite ragams at all? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I go through phases,
Phases,
honestly.
yeah, okay.
Um,
I've heard this from others too. They kind of go through
yeah,
phases and then they shift
and
their, yeah.
I think especially with like in the Indian traditional sort of styles, I feel like that's common because ragams, ragas, rags, whatever your
Mm,
terminology is,
mm,
they're like people. You interact with them, and some days you fight with them and you don't talk to them for a couple of days, and then
mm,
some days you're like, hey, let's grab a drink, and it's really chill, or you'll have a heart to heart that's really intense, and like that's kind of the relationship. So I feel like there's like an ebb and flow in how you relate to them.
yeah,
um right now I'm going through a Bhairavi phase,
amazing.
which is very fun. It's just I happen to be teaching one of my students the Bhairavi Navavarnam, and then I found an old T.M. Krishna Ragam Tanu Pallavi, and then there's an incredible Vainika Ramana Balachandran
Mm,
who has played a somewhat not rare but like uncommon composition that I learned growing up, and I heard his recording, and then now it's like we're in a drought and I'm taking 30-minute showers because I'm singing Bhairavi.
love
So
it.
that's what's going on now. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, but I tend to be a sucker for darker, or like what people might generally consider darker ragams. Kapi is a huge favorite.
Right.
Um, I feel like love for most people, Kapi is a there's something about it, and it's kind of a chameleon. It can be many things. So
Yeah. Look, with that said, you might want to sing something in Carnatic, 2 lines. Choice of yours. Any
yeah,
ragam that you want. Maybe Bhairavi phase. Anything.
now that you said Kapi, now I have Kapi in my head. Maybe I'll sing something.
Okay.
பாம்பு புலியுமானந்த வெள்ளமமிழ்ந்து குளிக்க பங்கஜமாலின் தாளம் மத்தளம் முழங்கவே பாம்பு புலியுமானந்த வெள்ளமமிழ்ந்து குளிக்க பங்கஜமாலின் தாளம் மத்தளம் முழங்க பார்வதி பக்கம் நின்று கண்டு மகிழவே பார்வதி பக்கம் நின்று கண்டு மகிழவே பார்வதி பக்கம் நின்று கண்டு மகிழ பக்தர்கள் முனிவர் துதிக்க பவனோய் மருந்து குஞ்சித பதம் தந்தோம் தந்தோம் என்றாடும் கனக சபையை கண்ட பிறகோர் காட்சியும் உண்டோ ஒரு காட்சியும் உண்டோ.
Beautiful, love it. Thank you so much. And something that I've
Ah.
noticed, and you keep your eyes open and you smile while you're singing. How do you do this?
I think it's a combination of two things. It's so funny that you asked this question because I feel like it's a very specific kind of thing to ask, like someone who's really into music or really into seeing these kinds of things. And most people don't think about this when they do certain things. But I'm kind of neurotic and I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing that? Um, I used to be eyes closed, hands down, stoic face kind of singer, especially when I was a kid. And which is probably a combination of nerves. And also like I'm a generally kind of ball of energy kind of person. And so my mom would always have to be like, can you just sit still for like 5 minutes? I would actually, I remember start concerts, I would be sitting like this. And by the end of the concert, I would be at like a 40-degree angle because I would just fidget and do so many things. So I would try to combat that when I was a kid. And then I think I just started to realize that, hey, if I'm excited about this, I might as well just be excited about it. And I enjoy singing. It sounds really lame. I enjoy singing, so I smile when I sing. There's obviously, you know, a vibe for certain songs that require a certain thing. But in the last few years, I've also been playing with a lot of musicians from other traditions, especially from the Middle East. And it's a lot of improvisation. And, you know, if you're improvising with someone, I mean, you can keep your eyes closed and you can kind of zone out a little bit, but you really have to have eye contact with people, especially if you're playing in a large band with like 7-8 people or more. You're like, okay, what's the bass player up to? What's the keyboard player up to? What's the guitar player up to? There's another vocalist maybe. So there's always eye contact that's kind of needed. So that I think combined with just my general, everything is hunky-dory, happy all the time kind of vibe. Yeah,
Cool.
It's just been like that for the last few years, but it wasn't always like that.
Amazing. But doesn't it make you, so one is you're not camera conscious, that's number one. Second, I take that's an yes, right? So, and secondly, you don't get distracted with people in front of you smiling or moving their hands, or I'm just curious to know, that's all.
That definitely happens.
Right.
I distinctly remember doing like concerts where I would see a friend would walk in or like an uncle or auntie would walk in that I knew, and I would be excited. And, you know, you see other artists do this, especially in carnatic music or classical music in general. You know, a chief guest walks in late or someone they know, and there's an acknowledgement that they'll do from the stage, middle of a line. You know, they'll be singing something and they'll put a hand to the chest or they'll nod. And so you see that and you're like, that's so cool. Like they're singing and they like know this person. And so I used to like also like smile and nod at them when they would walk in and then immediately mess up the next phrase or something like that. And you always get so upset. I was like, why do I not have this ability to like stay focused? And I think exposure to a lot of audiences has helped. Doing a lot of shows in different environments. If you do a lot of bars and pubs or weddings and things like that, where it's absolute chaos, you kind of have no choice but to find a way to hold it together with all that stuff going on. And then you sort of relax into the madness and you're like, okay, this is what it is. And this is the vibe of this concert, and just, you know, roll with it. I think that helps.
Yeah. And also I was also going to ask you, how do you remember the lines? That obviously that goes through a lot of rehearsals, I take it. But do you actually have an iPad or something like that in front of you, just in case if you miss out on lines? How does it really work? I'm trying to get into your shoes to think through how it actually happens. That's all.
Yeah. I try as much as possible to not keep any sort of notation. There's very few situations where I've done that. I'm trying to think. Yeah, a couple of them are big shows that will happen. Actually, one of them was the technically second, I guess, or third, I don't know, show that I got to do with Rahman sir, where I was doing like backing vocals in a live show in Vegas. And it was 3 hours of music. It was a very chaotic situation. Everybody got called like a few days before the gig, and we arrived and we just to learn. Luckily, you grew up listening to this music, you know all the melodies, but you realize when you have to sing it, you're like, wow, I really don't know some of these lyrics, especially the Hindi ones. You know, you're shoving in Tamil lyrics somewhere, or singing something that doesn't sound like what's being sung. So for that show, I remember keeping like a lyric sheet that we tried, that we just shared as a group, and we used it sparingly. And then shows where there's a lot of like where everything is really arranged. So the program I work with at Berklee College of Music is Berklee India Exchange, and through that there's the Berklee Indian Ensemble, which I'm sure we play a lot of Rahman sir's music. And when Shreya Ghoshal came to Berklee, there were so many specific arrangements. I was also playing some percussion in that show. So in those situations, I'll keep the sheet music with me and the lyrics, so I can track like, okay, there's a tihai that happens here, or this part is like 5/5/3, 5/5/4, or whatever it might be, the patterns that I have to play. But if it's just vocals, I try as much as possible to not have lyrics, because then you're reading, and then it's very hard to sort of be present. Yeah,
indeed. Amazing.
Not that it always works, but sometimes you forget lyrics.
And also, I mean, look, you obviously put a lot of stuff out on Instagram, on the reels and things like that. Does it make you feel vulnerable? Artists in general have to feel absolutely vulnerable when he or she has to put stuff out there, because people are bound to say all sorts of things, and we need to be thick-skinned, and that's one aspect which made me extremely conscious. I think probably when I did my first ever podcast, and I was super nervous to publish it on YouTube. I didn't know what people are going to say, but I just bit the bullet and I did it. But I want to hear it from an artist like yourself. What goes through you when you feel vulnerable and you're going to put yourself out there? And that is the only way out anyway. There's no... So talk me through it.
Yeah. I think I've always been aware of the fact that I'm like not a perfect singer. Like I always make mistakes. Like there'll be some note that's off shruti, or I'll fumble a lyric, or I make a lot of mistakes. I mean, people generally don't notice things, but as a self-critical person, you notice a lot of stuff. I think most musicians are that way. And so I think a part of that was me, and it was very hard to do, but just realizing like, hey, it's not going to be perfect, and perfection is also maybe not the most important thing. I had a vocal coach once tell me that there's like 4 things that audiences listen to, and 4 things that singers listen to, and they're in inverse order, because singers will place pitch, timing, accuracy, all those things first, and then like, maybe emotion and all that comes after. It's like the paint that you paint on once you've built the house. Whereas the first thing audiences connect with is the feeling that you give them, and the emotion that you bring when you sing a song, and how you phrase certain things. If you miss a note, most people are not bothered by that, because if you can capture the spirit of something, that's what art is about. And so that really helped me reframe, because I'm like, okay, get out of your head and just just be a person and do the thing that you enjoy doing. Cool. And reels are especially interesting. One, because this whole thing happened by accident. It was like not intentional, and it very quickly blew out of proportion.
And I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful it happened too. I got to meet so many people through this, and do so many things like this. Yeah, exactly. It's so nice to be doing this the day after I posted like a year's worth of reels, which actually started. I think I was wearing this sweater and sitting on this couch when I recorded my very first reel. It's so funny.
What a coincidence! Love it.
And I shut the door and I just turn on the camera, and I try not to do a lot of takes. I think that's one thing that helps me, because then I get too much into like, yo, this note has to be this and like that. I just be like, okay, I'm giving myself 30 minutes from start to finish, from plugging everything into my computer to turning the camera off and turning the mic off, and then transferring files. That's all I'm giving myself. Sometimes I have to learn a song, like for example, Tere Rang. I didn't know so well. It's a new song. I'd heard it a couple of times, but I was still in Chaka Chak phase when the rest of the songs came out. So I didn't give many of the other songs from that soundtrack probably the amount of listens they deserve, because I'm still like 2,000-3,000 listens into Chaka Chaka right now. Um,
Wow.
so I learned the lyrics, and then I'm like, just do it. Do it the first few times and just be like, okay, make mistakes. Okay, this is this lyric, especially with Hindi. It's like, okay, it's a duh, not a duh. As a Tamil person, just like immediately it always just comes out duh, and then you have to be like, no, it's duh. Um, and then it's like, okay, maybe the last couple of times their vibe is there, and then I try not to do too many. Um,
Super.
Otherwise,
So they're
you just
mostly
get too
one take.
involved. Yeah,
All your
yeah, they're
reels.
mostly one take. There's some situations where if I don't know a song
Mm.
well at all, or it's a very challenging language,
Mm.
um, or there's a lot of like chaos in like the house,
Mm.
like we're doing a lot of things, then I
Yeah.
might record the audio and then do the video, but I've only done that a couple times. I try as much as possible, one because I tend to be really bad at like syncing audio and video. I mean, luckily now Final Cut can do all these things for you, but like I'm like, oh no, it's like one frame off, and I don't want to deal with that. I'll just do it all in one take. It's really very jugad setup. I put my camera on my desk, and then I put the lyrics on Logic, and then I just put my mic just off frame like it is right now, um, and then and then invariably, because it's so far away, there's like room noise, and I have to like denoise it. It's just chaos every week. There's like so much anxiety that kicks in like an hour and a half before I post it. I'm like, oh god, some car passes by, and then it's like, how do I deal with this noise? Okay, increase the tambura. But it's a very like organic process, and
Right.
thank God they increased it to 1 minute, because it's so hard to cram things in 30 seconds, and
Mm.
um, it's been good because it forces me to practice in some way, and it also encourages me to
Mm.
sing a lot of music that I don't normally sing outside of like Indian ensemble.
Yeah.
The Indian ensemble does a lot of like contemporary like Indian music arrangements, so like indie music, Bollywood music, or other regional film music from India.
Yeah.
But like the kind of music I make is very like classical crossover kind of stuff. There's a refrain, then there's open solos or trades, and it's very like freeform kind of music.
Yeah.
So it's good for me because it also it keeps that part of me, like the music I listen to, and that I sing occasionally, but it gives me an opportunity to do that on a weekly basis, which is really nice. And I rediscover old songs. I find new songs. People started suggesting like Telugu songs, Kannada songs are so nice. I discovered the artist Bindu Malini through these reels, because she had a Kannada song that I found, and then we found each other, and then she listened to the album I put out last year, and we were able to connect that way. And it's been so much more than like a weekly social media post.
Yeah.
And again, I'm so glad that whatever test I was doing of Instagram reels for work, and I was like, okay, we didn't know how the interface worked, and we wanted to post a reel for the Indian ensemble. So we all told ourselves on the team, everybody post a reel this week and see what happens. I had done a virtual show, and so my camera, everything was already up. So I just sat here, and someone else on the background of a reel had posted this song Karne. It's a Taikuram bridge song. And I was like, oh, cool line. You Karne. It has it like a run, and I was like, ooh, I'm still a sucker for those things. So I was like, yeah. And so I sang that, and it did really well. And then my partner said, oh, can you sing Naina More next week? So I was like, great. A song that's not in Tamil, that's basically a Hindustani classical piece or semi-classical piece. And here I am singing this. And then it just snowballed, and more people started flocking to the page. And I'm so grateful that like a majority of them have kind of stuck around. I mean, I released an album in the meantime that's very much not this vibe of music. It's primarily carnatic stuff, original stuff that I wrote with my mom, along with some more like contemporary things, but nothing in the way of this sort of popular music vibe. I was very nervous. I was like, people come here now with an expectation of like, I make this kind of music, and then none of the music I release myself is in that space. People have responded, and they've been so kind and listened to the music, and it's just like, it's just nice that there's people out there who are just here to support people and to listen to music. And
Absolutely.
with all its drawbacks, social media is also just a great way to do that.
Indeed. So good.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned about tambura, so how do you actually have a tambura playing in the background, or how do you do it in your reels? This is a question on behalf of the community, because I see this question popping up every now and then, that people wanting to record something. How the hell do you have a tambura in the background? Is that an app, or how do you do it?
Yeah, it's this iTambura. Okay, I think it's gonna be too
Yeah,
far,
yeah.
because
Okay.
it's iTambura, and
Right.
I connect my AirPods,
Understand.
and I just I keep one ear or 2 ears in. I'm very inconsistent with how I do it, because luckily the new AirPods, whatever, have this transparency mode,
Yeah.
so you can put on the thing you can hear, but you can also hear yourself.
Right. Yeah, true.
And sometimes I have to calculate, I want to sing both the verse and the chorus of this. Instagram has a 1 minute time limit. Okay, so if I sing it at this tempo and it's 4 beats per bar, then I could only have this many beats per this thing to calculate what tempo I sing something at, so it fits in a minute or whatever. So sometimes I'll keep a click also, like the metronome app on my iPhone, play both at the same time.
Right.
And I do it that way. So that's why I that's how I monitor. It's very, again, very janky.
Great. And I want to dive into one of the coolest phases of your life, Berklee. Where did it all start, and what happened?
Where did it
please
start?
Take me through it.
Yeah, it started. So I have always been artistically inclined, but never really thought that music was like a thing that one could do for a career, which is quite funny because my mom is a professional musician. But I just was like, oh, I love music and I'll always have music. And what do I want to do with my life? I said, okay, maybe I'll go to med school. And that was very clearly a result of me being obsessed with House when I was like a sophomore and junior in high school, the TV show, with Hugh Laurie and all that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do infectious disease and I'm going to be House. That was my thing. And I was at some concert or some like Golu thing, and Sid Sriram was there. I still call him Siddharth. So he and I grew up like 15 minutes away from each other, or 20 minutes away from each other. He's another Bay Area kid. So his mom is also a
Can
Bay
you
Area
please do me a
teacher.
favor? Can you please put a word to him saying he needs to come on the podcast? And
for sure.
And I'm sick and tired of sending him a message saying, Sid, you're the only one missing out, dude. You have to come. And so please do this for me. Sorry, I digressed.
100%. No, of course. Yeah, I think he's been in the Bay for a lot of the pandemic too. I mean, everybody's kind of just been a hold up in places. So I mean, I grew up with him, and I mean, his amma is a Kannada teacher, my mom's a Kannada teacher, so we had that sort of thing. And so he was at I don't remember, and he was at Berklee at that time. I think he's 4 years above me. So he, you catch up with people as you do at these events. And so he was just like, oh, what are you planning on doing? And I said, oh, I'm probably going to like be pre-med or something. I said, and then he was like, oh, have you thought about music? And I was like, yeah, I think about music all the time. What are you asking me? And he was like, no, like as like something you study and do full-time as a career. And I was like, oh, like what? And he said, just go home and just look up Berklee College of Music. And he was like, Berklee. It's not UC Berkeley. And he went through the whole spiel. So I went home and I looked at this place and I was like, oh, this is like only music. And I was doing a lot of volunteer work at that time, working with kids and like after school programs and stuff. And they had a music therapy program that I was really interested in. So I said, let me just go do a summer program here. It was like right before my senior year, before I applied. So I did 2 back-to-back 3-day programs. So I was there for a little under a week. And it was just incredible. First of all, it was nice to be in a place where there's practice rooms in every building and there's instruments in every room. You walk into a room, there's like hooks on the wall and there's just XLR cables all across the wall. There's a basket of mics, there's spare guitars and basses for people who have, whatever. It's such a cool place to be. It's like you're in like a musician's like dream playground. And then the vibe of the people there, they're just excited to make music. And that was so invigorating. And I remember, I think a couple of days before I left, um, Siddharth and I, and then another friend from the Bay Area who came with me, we went to this place called Pho Basil. It's right across the street from Berkeley.
Right.
It's like a big Berkeley hangout spot. It's Thai food.
Okay.
It's very good. It got to the point where they knew me by name when I was in high school. In college, I'd call, they'd be like, "Oh, is it Ro? Okay, we'll see you in 15 minutes. We won't take your order. We know what it is." We sat down there and he was like, "How was the experience?" He took us on a tour and was like, "This is a really great place. You can learn a lot of new skills." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm sold." And so I basically approached my applications like, Berkeley's number one. That's where I'm going. And I went there. I still studied music therapy. And I was coming back from, it was my very first semester. And at my orientation week, the opening concert for the incoming students, they usually have a couple ensembles from the college play. Like ensembles are classes that you take. So the class will come together and do a little short 10-minute recital. A few of them will do that for all the students. They're like, "Wow, look at all this cool music. I want to be in that ensemble." And so the Indian ensemble played at my convocation concert, my first week. And I think it was their fourth, they were just about to start the fourth semester of the ensemble. And I remember sitting in the back with another friend, Sashank Navladi, who's a musician in the ensemble and has also played with Rahman sir a couple of times in live shows. He and I were sitting next to each other. We just met, Indian kids, we're magnets for each other. And we watched this and I was like, "This is so cool. There's like Indian music, but it's like not all Indians playing Indian music. Like, that's awesome." There's an angry Irish guy who I later discovered is a very kind, funny Iraqi guy playing violin. And it's amazing. And I told them I wanted to join this ensemble when I tried to sign up for classes, and they were like, "Oh, but you have a background in Indian music, so you probably should do something else."
Right.
So I got put in like a classical concert choir. And then I happened to be walking past a classroom one day after a private lesson, and I hear Ishwar Allah coming from a classroom.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard that song in so long.
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" And then I just sat outside that room, and it had been, I think, 3 or 4 weeks since school had started. And, the Bay Area has a really big Indian population, and there's not as many Indians in Boston. And there were especially no Indians at Berkeley at that time, barely, like 4 of us, 5 of us.
Right.
And I just got really emotional. And I just remember sitting outside the room. I just cried for like 20 minutes while they rehearsed this song. And then the door opened, and then, I think the president of the college at the time, Roger Brown, was there with a couple donors, and they came out. And then, students started shuffling out. I saw Sashank, and then I saw Annette, who is the founder of the ensemble. And then Sashank was like, "Hey, this is Rohith. He's that kid I was telling you about. He sings like carnatic music." She was like, "Oh, why don't you come by on Tuesday at 4 p.m. to this classroom next week if you have that time free? Just swing by." And I was like, "Yeah, of course, cool." And I came, and they were doing Ridhun, one of the old like indie tunes, Shankar Mahadev and Tawfiq Qureshi. So I was like, "Cool, yeah, I'll come." And they were running that song, and then there's like a solo section, and she just points at me. She's like, "Oh, do you want to try soloing?" And I'm this naive little kid thinking like, "Oh, this is so cool," not realizing that it was basically an audition. And so I did a little bit of soloing. And she was like, "Yeah, if you're free, just come every week at the same time. And then also on Wednesday mornings, we meet in this classroom with the whole band, with the instrumentalists. So just, if you're free, come by." And then I did the Indian ensemble every semester until I graduated, which is amazing because a year after I joined, Clinton came for the first artist residency. The year after, Rahman sir came, which was like, I think like all of us, like low blood sugar, fainting constantly when he arrived, and then just never stopped until he left. Just then after Rahman sir, it was Vijay Prakash, and then Shankar sir, and then Shreya came, and then Zakirji came a couple of years ago.
Nice.
And it's so nice because some of my best friends, I met my partner in the Indian ensemble, people that I play with all the time. Some of my closest musical friends are from the Indian ensemble. And so that this family has sort of carried through. I went back to work with the Indian ensemble at Berkeley. So it's kind of just this nonstop journey that's continuing through the pandemic. We're doing a bunch of new things now. trying to release some music on streaming finally, since all of our music is rearrangements and covers. It's kind of hard to get them on streaming with the labels and the whole deal. But no, I'm so grateful that I stopped. If I hadn't stopped outside that classroom, I don't know if and when I would have joined the Indian ensemble. So being homesick sometimes has a benefit.
Yeah. And what was it like when Sir came to Berkeley? I've seen all the videos, by the way, and then I absolutely love it. And these videos keep coming back and forth into the community, and people loving it back and forth again. So, what was it like to see him live? And was that the first time you met him, saw him in person?
I had met him only once. Met is a generous word. I had seen him only once before,
Right.
and it was in his very first US tour, in like the late 90s, I think 99, 2000, that kind of time period. Yeah. And they had a show at a venue called Cow Palace in the Bay Area. It's like an arena, and it was the first time that he had ever come to the US. And I mean, he became a big deal very quickly. So it was basically like a huge deal for all the Indians that were here. And one of our family friends is like part of event organization. So she had managed to get me backstage during the show. So, Udit G is singing on stage and I'm in the back, taking a photo. I'm sitting on Shankar Sir's lap, taking a photo. I distinctly remember pulling Hariji's ponytail because I didn't know that it was like a person. It's dark in these places. It's just, I was just being a kid. And then after the show, we got to go to the front of the stage. Everybody was out of the venue. Lights were all on. Crew was breaking things down. And Rahman sir walks out and he's wearing like about the kind of this color gray, I would say. Like a sweatshirt and sweatpants in the same, clearly a set. And he comes and he's packing his own stuff. He's putting his keyboard in the case and folding the keyboard stand and all that. And I remember being like this guy wrote a Dilse. Like someone should pack his keyboard for him. Like as a 5-6-year-old, this is going through my head, or however old I was. That was the first time I'd seen him. So when he arrived at Berkeley, it was, 15 years later or whatever. And it was the first time that I talked to him, I guess. And there was so much anticipation. I mean, Annette had emailed us months in advance, like at the end of the previous semester. And I still have the email where it's like something, I'm so grateful. We did this wonderful show, la la la. Next semester, we're also going to have a fall artist in residence like we had Clinton last year. And then in bold, all caps red, it says, our next guest artist is going to be A.R.Rahman or something to that effect. And I remember I was like standing up in my apartment being like, this is not happening. And so I stayed that summer. I was doing the summer semester and we met every day for about 2 months, I think, to go through, I want this song to be in the show. No, I want this song to be in the show. Okay, fine. We all want these. And, this is one of the proudest things I've done with the Indian ensemble is Malargale was not going to be in the show. Like there was just no time to play all his music. So many great songs we couldn't put in the show. Nilaka Giri, that never happened. And Malargale almost didn't happen. And so what I would do is when we would have these repertoire meetings, I would just sit at the piano in the room and just play like and just like quietly in the back. I wouldn't say anything. And then eventually Annette caught on and she was like, okay, this subliminal messaging thing is not going to work. Okay. And then when we were doing the Slumdog Millionaire medley, it just happened to fit really coolly at that higher tempo. And then she was like, you know what? I guess 4 weeks of you playing this melody constantly, it did work. And I think there's a photo we have somewhere of the board, which is just like probably like 300 of his songs written with like arrows pointing, saying like these could be together in a medley. And it was crazy. And then it was everyday rehearsal, 4 to 6 hours with choreography and coming with vocal parts, and learning all these songs. And the 16 of us who were sort of like the lead vocals, you might say, who were basically free, who just killed our semester to just be there every day from 4 p.m. onwards. We were so excited because we were really tight and also like, oh my God, he's actually coming, It's not like we're doing a tribute show at Berklee. He's going to be there. And we were in a huge room that we managed to get because there were 100 or so musicians in this show. It's called the Zero Gravity Room. And we were in this room and we were rehearsing. We knew he was coming that day. So like we were rehearsing and everybody would, like, if the door is here, we were facing here, the door is there. We would keep practicing like this. Like no one was paying attention to what the heck was going on. We just, okay, someone would walk in, the door would open and be like, oh my God, he's here. And it would be like another student who had like gone to the bathroom or something. And we were just like constantly like this fear. And then he walked in and it was him with our managing director at the time. And Kevin Doucette was there. Yeah. And Kevin's a Berklee alum. And I mean, I think he did a lot to make the students comfortable. He's really good with people. And obviously we were like nervous enough for 50 people each individually. So he really helped put us at ease. And, you know, Rahman sir is the kind of person. Oh, really? Yeah, amazing.
Kevin is coming.
He's the best. And Rahman sir is the kind of person where, I don't know, he doesn't do anything to make you nervous, obviously. But he has an aura about him because he's not like a bombastic, like he doesn't like come into a room. Like Shankar sir comes into a room and there's so much energy when he walks in and he's like, you know, this boisterous person. But Rahman sir walks in like any normal person. And somehow still has that same effect on the room. Yeah. And so he came in and he played, you know, Bombay theme and ran it with the orchestra, and, you know, all the vocalists sat down, and I still have videos. Like I had hidden my phone in my shoe and I took a video of him sitting at the Continuum and he was playing Bombay theme, and then he heard us run a couple songs. I think we ran the romantic medley, which we meant to rename and we never did. And then there were shots of the sheet music in the video for the show. And we just said, okay, this is called Epic Medley, called Romantic Medley. And so I sang, you know, a little bit of Uire, whatever was in that medley, in front of him. And I remember like holding the mic with both hands because my hands were shaking. But he was so gracious. And, you know, it was packed full of events for him that week. Yeah. But before the show, he came and took a picture with us. And then before we entered the stage, he sort of was in a back room and we all lined up in the corridor to do our entrance for Bombay theme. And I remember he walked through the crowd and I got to like touch his feet when he walked by, which felt like, okay, this is going to be a good show. And it was really special to just see him come on stage. And I don't think he had been doing a lot of like live shows at that time. So he wasn't really in like a singing, like constantly singing on stage, performing live all the time kind of mode. So I think he, you know, was a little nervous too. You know, he's not like a singer first, maybe. So it was really, it made us feel good. You're like, okay, if A.R.Rahman can be a little nervous, then, you know, I'm allowed to freak out before a show. So that was really nice. And then, you know, through that, I got to, you know Kevin, and they needed a singer for a show, and, you know, he reached out, and through that, I was able to do a couple sort of backing vocal gigs, and then his connection with Berklee has continued. So I've got to meet him a couple times through that, and he shared one of my reels, which was cool. That was nice.
So cool.
Yeah, those things, the little kid in you like emerges when that happens.
Of course.
It's so funny. Yeah.
And
but no, that week, sometimes you're like, I don't remember that week, and I remember everything that week. You know, it's like a blur, and it's very vivid at the same time.
What was it like doing backing vocals for him?
The first time I did it was we only sang Jeho, and it was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. So it was like the instrumentless thing. Yeah. So they were doing a lot of
Intel thing, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of testing with the Intel stuff. You know, I got to meet Aditya Rao through that gig, and you know, he's like a really good friend now, and just from the couple of days that we met there. But that was pretty straightforward. Arjun Chandy had written vocal parts for everybody, sheet music. Thank God I went to Berklee and I knew how to read that. Before that, it was just dots and lines, and it was like, where is the swaram? So we were able to read that, and it was pretty straightforward from a vocal standpoint. Yeah. But the second show, actually, funnily enough, also in Las Vegas, was a regular ARR live show. It was 2.5-3 hours, 40 songs or whatever it might be. which we got a couple days before because his band couldn't get visas.
Right.
So the only people who were able to come were Rahman sir, Ranjit Barot, and one other person in the band. And now, of course, now I'm blanking. So Nazif called Annette in the middle of an Indian ensemble rehearsal, actually, and she never picks up the phone during rehearsal. But Nazif called, so she was like, "I'm just gonna take this, okay." So the students all waited, and I had just started teaching at working at Berkeley at that time, so I was trying to like man the students a little bit. And so they needed 10 people. They needed some vocalists, percussionists, a couple of keyboard players, etc. So this call we got was on a Wednesday or something, and the show was on like a Tuesday the next week.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to do all the flight bookings, make sure everything was clear first. So by the time we got the music, it was like Saturday or Friday. And so I remember I booked a classroom and I just plugged in and I was blasting this music and just singing along. We sang that song from Pele, Jinga.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is in Portuguese. How am I going to find out what these lyrics are? So I was like, thank God I knew A.R.R, got the lyrics from him. And it was very like, oh my God, I know Nadan Parinde, but I don't know the lyrics for Nadan Parinde. What's going on? And you're going to like A to Z lyrics.com and you're trying to get the lyrics for these songs and hoping it's correct. And then we walked into rehearsal and he came in, we ran songs one time through. It was so like the level that he expected everybody to be at was both really intimidating, but also really like, okay, it set the tone, Yeah. Like this wasn't like a rehearsal that we do at Berkeley where you're like, okay, you go in and you're like, okay, we're going to dedicate half an hour to do Unne Karna Danan, okay, because we have to fix this and this part, everybody needs to be tight. No, you might run. We didn't run some songs at all, actually. He expects you to be there and know everything. And Annette had toured with him the previous year. So she kind of gave us a little brief before. She was like, do your homework and then do your homework again. And I'm so grateful because we showed up, we knew everything. And you brought up the Microsoft Teams thing at the beginning, and it's so funny. There was, it was Pataka Guddi, I think. Mm-hmm. So Sashank, my friend who I met my first week at Berkeley, he was playing keyboard at this gig. And he had to play some patch in that song. I think it was that song. And it wasn't the right patch. So Rahman sir kept looking back. And then eventually he kind of paused the song and he was like, that's not the right sound. And then I like just on behalf of Sashank started panicking. Like my heart rate tripled when this happened. And so Sashank is going through patch by patch. He's clicking, playing something. That's not the one. Clicking, something. That's not the one. Eventually he goes, open this plugin and then go to like the fourth menu thing down. And then if you go here and then go to this and then scroll down and then like the 50th one will be that's probably the one. And it was exactly the sound like from the original song. And it was like, this guy has so much going on in his life. Aside from composing and doing live shows, he's doing events. He's like a brand ambassador for so many things. He's like a full like famous person. And he still is like a producer at heart and knows where to find his favorite plugins. And, and that was just such a cool moment. As someone who was like, wow, like these sounds came from like, it was very crazy. And he's also, you think of these big stadium shows as like everything is set in stone.
Yeah.
But he's so like open. I remember he walked up to us in the middle of the show, like Hamma Hamma is going on. And he walked up to the backing vocals. Adi had sung one verse. No, he had sung the Hindi verse. And then he walked up to us and he was like the band is playing. One of the interludes is is happening. Something is happening. Mm-hmm. And he comes up to us and he's like, off mic, who's going to sing the second Antara? And we're like, we weren't supposed to play it. And I had my iPad and I was trying to Google the lyrics for the Hindi one because we had done the Hindi thing and there wasn't enough time. And I just sang the Tamil lyrics for the verse and it just happened. And it was cool because there was still a little bit of like energy, improvisation that happens even in these things where there's so many things going on and people are so attached to these songs. And for an artist at that level to to just be free like that in a situation like that is inspiring, because we get stuck and we're playing for 10 people, and he's like, no, let's just do another verse, why not? There's like thousands of people there. It's cool.
So amazing.
And he's a normal guy. He'd be like, hey, I likes this place, and he's very Chennai guy. He'll show you pictures of something he's going to build or something he's working on, and he doesn't treat you like he is who he is. He just treats you like a person that he knows.
Correct.
Check this out. This is cool, isn't it? I'm like, of course, it's very cool.
Yeah. So cool. I love hearing stories like these. And just out of curiosity, you were talking about Shashank trying to figure out that the patch or the plugin thing. Was Ashwin the flautist also around at the same time?
No, I'm so glad. I think it was Naveen who played flute at this gig.
Right.
But I think Shashank has played a couple of other keyboard gigs with A.R.Rahman sir.
Right.
And
okay.
Ashwin has played.
Because
I think at the UN maybe.
Ashwin narrated the exact same thing, and probably it was in another concert, but it was in the US, and I was completely
maybe it was the
away.
UN concert. Yeah.
Yeah, and he narrated the exact same thing where Sir was directing us to go here, click this, and get this plugin, and you'll get the right sound.
It's so cool because I don't know. You think, okay, I'm a normal person. That's not a normal person, right? Like that's like not a human being. It's like a figure of some sort. And then I'm sitting here and I have to remember, okay, if I want to find this color grade thing, or I have to find this plugin, or I want to find the right reverb, I remember where this goes. But like, you don't think that like people like that are also doing the same things, and it's very cool. It makes you feel like you're like, no, we're all musicians, That's cool.
Indeed. And so you've had a Carnatic classical upbringing, and you've learned it for like 10-15 years. So with that said, when a soundtrack comes out from Sir's studio, obviously it has combination of tracks. They could be a Carnatic based track, maybe one or two, and then there are other genres as well. So you're naturally inclined to a Carnatic based track. Is that what usually happens? Let's say an album comes out with Malargal Ketten, and then also had Hello Doctor in it in the same album. I'm just making it up. I'm creating this hypothetical album which will never come.
Yeah.
What would be your inclination?
I think that's, well, okay, maybe it's not it's probably not the answer you're looking for, but when I think back to like, okay, when I listen to, like, I remember listening to the Ali Payude soundtrack and liking Ali Payude, but also like loving the other songs. And I think I don't think it's like because this is what I grew up learning, or because this is like what I perform in kachiris or whatever, that I'm gonna purposefully stay away from this. I think it was just I gravitated towards his overall music sense. Right. And obviously, songs like Malargal Ketten and stuff are like beautiful. And even they reveal like aspects of his musicality and how his musical brain works. But I oftentimes relate to, I think the cleanest way to say it is this late 90s to mid-late 2000s era of like that Rahman sir sound. I think that is what I gravitate towards. Like I listened to all of 99 songs, and Seeman Dapu was the song that I was like, this is the one.
Right.
And I think it's because it captured that sound that like when I was 10, 12, 13 years old, when I think back to like what Rahman sir's song sounded like at that time, it captures that spirit, Even Chaka Chak has this old timey sound. I guess it's now you can consider it old timey because it's 2022.
The interlude.
The interlude. Yeah, and it's been a long time since I think we've heard such a folky percussion heavy Rahman sort of soundtrack. It's been a while, you know.
Mm.
It it so I think that kind of middle of his current thing timeline nostalgia, I think that's what I tend to gravitate towards.
Mm.
More than the classical things. I have a very interesting relationship with like Carnatic music and in general, where like we like smile and nod at each other in public and we meet in private later. Like
Depends on the phases or the phase.
Yeah, I stopped doing kacheris pretty early in college, and I got really interested in exploring like other styles of music that are also improvisation heavy. And I think at some point I was like, there's better people cut out to do kacheris than me, and I will never be that person, and that's okay, because I have some other way that I can use this language that I speak or sing, you know. And it's an invigorating experience for me to play with an Arabic violinist, or you know, to play with an Ethiopian vocalist, which was a cool thing I got to do. And those kinds of things I think really amp me up. And it challenges me, because it's like you speak a language, but then if you have to communicate with somebody who doesn't speak that language, you have to kind of change your accent, so to speak, maybe, you know. So that's kind of where I sit with Carnatic music. I mean, when I practice, I'm still putting swaram and doing Nadaval and doing all those things, but from a performance standpoint, I think in a less Carnatic way. I call myself Carnatic adjacent. If there's like a bridge out of Carnatic town, I'm like the troll under the bridge on the exit side, you know, like.
Very cool. Nice. And it wasn't the answer that I was expecting, but it's very good to hear.
Yeah.
And any of the tracks that has had sort of an impact on you, the tracks that comes to your mind?
Yeah, when I listen to, like, if I put Rahman on shuffle, there's like certain songs that like no matter what, you kind of listen to the whole thing, you know, no matter what the vibe of the day. Ayore Saki is one of them, from Water.
Wow.
I mean, Uire or Tuhire, it depends on the day, I think. There's one song that nobody I know knows. Anbe Aruire.
I do, from you.
Yeah. And I remember, like, I heard it because I was in like an auto and the guy was playing it, like it was playing on the radio in Chennai. And I was like, what is this song? And Shazam had just come out at that time. So I was like Shazamming it, and I discovered the song. I went through a phase with that song. A lot of the songs from A.R.Rahman. I went through a Kaatu phase. And, you know, luckily Spotify has released like like all these extra tracks. I remember finding the Chinnapurne Kaatu like that like dark folk thing that happens where there's like a dramatic scene between them in the forest. And it's like the coolest, most gut-wrenching, like raw version of that song. I mean, it's barely the version with Shankar sir and that you hear, but it's so cool. I remember ripping that from YouTube, from the scene, so you can hear like the sound design from the movie and dialogue and stuff. That's on Spotify now, and there's a beautiful song from that soundtrack called Nan Varuvene. That's also really nice.
And interestingly enough, the Hindi version is missing out on Spotify. They haven't released that.
Oh, really?
Hindi version of the same
I think
song.
I still have it on like iTunes, old-fashioned CD import to iTunes version. So I have that. But I think both film-wise and soundtrack-wise for that, I think I connect with the Tamil version more. Yeah, Kaatu is just a killer song, and especially the first half of course now I can't think of the song. Kadakari is like such a cool song.
Oh yeah.
The video of that song is cool. The song is cool. It's and I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, this sounds so cool. I get so excited. Vinay Tandi Vaduvaya songs.
Nice.
Yeah, then you enter the rabbit hole. But I think my dad was a big Manargade guy, so that song has stuck with me. And then there was one more song that I was thinking of that I'm now forgetting. It'll come back to me at some point.
That's cool.
Dang. Now I have to open iTunes and look. These things bother you if you don't remember them.
Yeah.
Oh, Rasali.
Oh, wow.
I opened up and luckily Achamyan with his A, so it was the first on the.
So
When
cool.
Rasali came out, I went to New York that weekend, and it was like a 4.5 hour bus ride from Boston round trip. I mean, each way, so like 9 hours total, and buses run into traffic. So I think I was in a bus for 10 hours total that weekend, and it was just Rasali on repeat, full, the whole thing.
Wow.
It's just insane.
Is that what usually happens when you're in the Chakachak phase, on the Rasali phase, the track goes on in a loop?
Yeah, that's like my listening process. I listen to a whole thing, and then it's definitely not like I mean, I don't stop it, but it's not like an intentional thing that happens. That's how it happens. Same thing happened with Simandapu when it came out. Kaatu Chiriki happened that way. Like I listen to the whole thing, and then there will be a couple that stick out, or maybe it's just one that like has a different level of connection, and then that song becomes like I just play it until like I'm done, and I'm not like done with a song, but like I'm like, okay, saturated with it, and like whatever weird part of me that needed that song for some X period of time, when that period of time is revealed to be over, it's like, okay, I'm done. Like I think I only stopped listening to Chaka Chak like 2 days ago.
I can't believe this.
Yeah, it just didn't stop. You can there's a guy who plays with us in the Indian ensemble and also plays on all my stuff, Giri Subramaniam. He's a tabla player, and I was in Boston when the song came out, staying at his house, and I remember he was in a meeting. I was like, dude, you have to listen to this song. And they have a Bluetooth speaker in their bathroom, so when they shower, like some people listen to music when they shower.
Yeah.
And they would go, yeah, right, and they would go to work, and then I would take a shower. I would like connect my phone to their Bluetooth speakers, like blast Chaka Chak, both the Tamil and Hindi versions on loop. And I made a playlist on Spotify that I know is eventually going to become, it's called ARR Bangers, and it's eventually going to become like all the like a vibey upbeat songs, but I couldn't put anything else on it for the time being because I just needed that song to repeat only. Like I put Param Sundari on it too, just for kicks. And then I was like, nope, I'm not ready to not listen to this song, and just repeated. I think over the weekend, when I was listening to this Bhairavi thing, it just eased me out of this Chaka Chak phase. And then of course today I put another playlist on shuffle that also had it in it, and then it played in the car, and then I was like, yeah.
So amazing, because I can relate to it, because I go in an infinite loop, track by track. So I don't go ahead and listen to the entire soundtrack all at once when it releases. I go track by track. So I was stuck with Chaka Chak for a while. I was stuck with Tere Rang for 3 days in a row, non-stop playing. Haricharan knows about it, Sir knows about it. And then I finally went to Raid Zarasi, when I'm talking about Atrangi, of course. Then Tume Mohabbat. But this is just me being me, but I could never listen to Tume Mohabbat in a loop, because it takes me to a certain zone, and I don't want to be in that zone, and I don't want to listen to it in an infinite loop. But that's me. So
no, there's certain songs that serve certain like parts of you, and I'm a big I love film. I watch a lot of movies too, and I have this with certain like I can't watch a movie, or I can't listen to a certain song if I'm in a certain space. Like if you're feeling especially vulnerable and like there's like a dark song, I can't do it, because I know it's just I'm not ready for like the catharsis yet, or whatever it might be, or it's songs are like people, and you need people in certain moments. That's super interesting.
So very
I like Terang especially because it was just nice to hear Haricharan sing in Hindi. In like a recorded, released setting. I've seen some live shows with Rahman sir where he sings everything. But to have like a recorded version of him singing like a nice, like semi-classical song with Shreya was like dream come true. So when I heard Anbin Vasili for the first time, I was like, whoever this man is that's singing this song should just sing every song that exists like on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Just and luckily when you go to a Rahman sir show, it's him singing mostly the whole time. So the
Indeed.
victory.
Great guy. I've had the opportunity to interact with him a number of times in my concert trips, and then he's also been on the
Nice.
podcast. Been a
Yeah,
great,
yeah, yeah.
still a great friend. Maybe on that note, two lines of Tererang, Rohit. How about that?
Yeah. मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके धुन सांस सांस में बुन के धुन सांस सांस में बुन के कर दे प्रेम का गीत का मोह का शगुन मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके मुरली की ये धुन सुन राधिके.
Love it,
I
love
don't know
it.
why I got attached to this line that's not in the song. You'd sing something once and then you're like, I guess this is happening every time now. That thing. I don't know why it happened in that one take, and now I can't like peel it off.
I love it.
Brains
I
are such a
absolutely love it. And the song that I was talking about, the other one that I would love to listen to in your voice is I'm not sure if you might be ready for it, but it's Tume Mohabbat. I somehow feel
Oh,
that this
I don't know
song,
that song well enough, or I don't even remember it. I think it's from Atrangi, no?
yeah,
Yeah, I hit that Chaka Chak wall. My parents watched it yesterday, and I heard Little again when they were watching it. But I confess I don't know the song well enough. But I now owe you a rain check of that song. So maybe I'll do it. I'll learn it and I'll do it for reals.
okay. And so, any other song that you would like to sing? Let's say, dedicate something for Sir. Let's wrap up the podcast that way. Any song you want.
காதல் இருந்தால் எந்தன் கண்ணோடு கலந்து விடு காலம் தடுத்தால் என்னை மண்ணோடு கலந்து விடு உயிரே உயிரே வந்து என்னோடு கலந்து விடு உயிரே உயிரே என்னை உன்னோடு கலந்து விடு நினைவே நினைவே இந்த நெஞ்சோடு கலந்து விடு நிலவே நிலவே இந்த விண்ணோடு கலந்து விடு.
Anything else you want to touch on, Rohit, while you're here on this podcast before we wrap up? Is there anything that I have not touched on and you would like to talk about? I don't want you to walk away thinking this guy didn't even talk to me about this.
I don't think so. I think we talked about a lot of stuff actually somehow, and it didn't feel like it was very long. But yeah, I think we
Right.
touched upon a lot of really really beautiful things.
Thank you.
I don't think. I mean, if I think of something, I'll let you know. But I don't think. I really think we covered a crazy range of things.
And
It's always
I'm
nice
very
to-
keen to bring you back again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We'll do that again in a couple of months. But I'm super,
Yeah.
super.
I will resolve my gain issue by then. I promise.
And it's been absolutely phenomenal to have you on the podcast, Rohit. And then I'm not sure
Thanks
if you're
so much.
aware, you've been hanging out with me for the last an hour and a half. And sorry I held
Yeah.
you up with
No,
your other
not at all.
commitments if you had any. And I just want to say
Just
thank
dinner.
you for giving me your time. And
No, thank
looking
you.
forward
I
to-
mean, I remember watching the first couple episodes when they showed up on my related, and then when you messaged me, I was like, I know this face, I know this name. Very excited and honored that you thought to include me in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and please continue to do what you're doing. And the fans within the community absolutely love you. And I'm looking forward to seeing their expressions the moment I tell them that Rohith was actually on my podcast. And yeah, I'll share that with you. So,
Yeah,
Rohith,
please do.
thanks once again.
Thank
And
you.
enjoy the rest of your day. And looking forward to catching up with you very soon and in person. Let's do an in-person
Yeah.
podcast when I travel to the US or when you travel here to Australia.
100%. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
I mean, if there's any safe place to be in the world.
Great. Thank you so much, Rohith. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rohith. I'll let you go.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for your time.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry it went for an hour and a half.
No,
But I
it's so
enjoyed. I absolutely
easy
enjoyed.
and nice talking to you. Yeah.
Thanks once again. Bye,
Yeah.
Rohith.
Hope to meet you soon in person. Yeah.
For sure.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.